Hi, I'm Megan and welcome to my kitchen. In today's What's for Dinner video, I'll be sharing with you what meals we had this past week. Our dinners were easy to make, budget friendly, and delicious. So if you're looking for some weeknight meal ideas for your family, just keep watching. Before I get into these dinners, my mom and I and my little brother went up to Kentucky for a family reunion. This happens every year, and it's basically my granny, so my mom's mom. It's her cousins. And so they're my third, fourth cousins maybe, but there's lots of good just home cooking, and so I wanted to share it with you, maybe just to give you some ideas of things to try or things that you could take to your next family reunion. So here's what we had. We've got fried chicken, meatloaf, turkey and dressing and gravy, barbecue meatballs. And then no one will ever convince me otherwise, but I think older Southern ladies make the best chicken and dumplings, hands down. And one of our cousins made these right at the beginning of the reunion, so they were hot and fresh and they were amazing. And then we had some roasted potatoes, cheesy potatoes with ham, hash brown casserole, coleslaw, green beans, a potato salad up next to the green beans, and then on the lower left is my mom's potato salad. I'll share how she makes this and I make it. I've shared this before on my channel. I'll link it down below. We've got some deviled eggs. Somebody brought some yellow tomatoes from their garden sliced up, and they also brought some cucumbers, but they set them down after I got this picture. And then I made a corn salad. I've shared this before on my channel. The recipe is for a Shoepeg corn salad, but I could not find any Shoepeg corn at all. So I just used regular yellow can corn, and it was still delicious. We've got a taco dip, and then we got 2 different kinds of Rotel dip along with tortilla chips. And then we've got all the bread. So we've got some rolls and homemade cornbread. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a family reunion, especially a Southern family reunion, without lots of sweets and desserts. So somebody brought some chips, and then we've got some bars. This bundt cake, I think it was a walnut cake. I got a little slice of it, and I think it was a walnut cake. And then somebody made this like lemon Oreo cookie pudding cake. And then we have a pretty store-bought cake along with some homemade apple pies. And you guys, these apple pies are made by, I hate to say this, but she is an older lady, like maybe in her late 80s, and she hasn't been to the past few family reunions because of health issues. And when she brought this tray in this time, you guys, like, she couldn't even make it to the table before people were like sneaking pies because they go so fast. Then we've got another dirt pudding cake. This one was just the traditional with chocolate pudding. My mom's banana pudding, which again, I've shared how we make that. I'll put it in the description box below for you. And then this other cake, one of my mom's cousins were telling us about it. She said it was like the 2-ingredient cake where you mix like crushed pineapple and an angel food cake mixed together. There may be some other ingredients, but that's what that was. I tried it. It was yummy. We've got a cheesecake, cherry cobbler, and then I made this pig picking cake. I recently shared it on my channel. I'll link that video down below for you. So here are a picture of my plates. Yes, you heard me correctly. I said plates, plural. If you know me and you've been with me for a while, you know I don't like a lot of my foods to touch. So I tend to do tiny little piles. And then when I go to family reunions or potlucks, I usually like to get just a little bit, like maybe a tablespoon or 2 of not everything, but most things, just to give things a try. But yeah, that was our meal for our family reunion. It was delicious. And yeah, I was super excited when I went in the kitchen at the end, whatever's left over, people can just make plates and take them home. And there was some chicken and dumplings left, and so I swiped some and ate them for a snack later. They were so good. My mom had bought hot dogs and hot dog buns to take to the family reunion, and then she ended up deciding not to take them. That night for dinner, we just decided to do chili dogs at the Airbnb that we were at. So on our way home from the reunion, or not home, but, to the Airbnb, we had to stop and get gas. So I ran into the gas station and got some ridiculously overpriced chili. And so, yeah, we just went home. My mom boiled up the hot dogs, warmed up the chili, and that's what we had for dinner that night. Next day, we left Kentucky and traveled home. If you saw I think it was my grocery haul, I mentioned that my dad and Gary were supposed to go out of town for business for a few days, and my mom had a medical procedure a few days before the reunion, and so she couldn't drive herself. And so I drove her and my brother to the reunion. So when I got back home, Gary wasn't there, and he didn't come home for another couple more nights. The morning of the reunion, I'd made some sausage gravy and just did some canned biscuits. We had some left over, so that night I didn't really feel like cooking after, driving all day, and it was just me. So I just heated up the biscuits and gravy, heated up the biscuits in the air fryer, added a little milk to the gravy, popped it in the microwave, and yeah, that was my dinner. I had some canned salmon in the pantry that needed to be used up, and salmon patties just sounded good to me, so I decided to make them. I have shared this before on my channel, but it's been a while. Everybody makes salmon patties differently, I've found, at least here in the South. And if you have a way that your, mama or granny or mom or aunt or aunt, whoever made them, make them the way that you like them. This is just how I grew up eating them. So I've got some canned salmon. You can also use mackerel. I think, in fact, my grandparents probably preferred mackerel, but I don't necessarily mind the little tiny pin bones, but these little circle bones, I don't like those, so I picked those out. And then I add the salmon to a bowl. I did drain the salmon, but I reserved the liquid just in case you need to add a little bit to moisten it back up. Now, sometimes I add mayonnaise, sometimes I don't. I don't remember my grandmother doing that, but I just add like a little tablespoon if I add it. I added in an egg. And then for the binder, we always use a little bit of flour and a little bit of cornmeal. I do like maybe a quarter cup of each. But like I said, everybody's different. I know some people that make these use like crushed up saltines. Some people use breadcrumbs. So like I said, just make them how you like them. So I give that a really good mix, and then I like to test it out to see if the patties will hold together. If they're too dry, you can add a little bit of that salmon liquid, or you can add a little splash of milk. If they're too wet, just add a little more of your binder. I make the patties that I find one can makes 4 good sized patties. So I patted them out, and then in this skillet, I've got some cooking oil. I just heated it up on medium heat, and then you want to cook these for about 3 to 5 minutes per side until they're golden brown. And I did show this on camera, but I forgot to mention it. I added some salt and pepper. And like I said, do what you like. I know some people add like diced onion to this. Some people add garlic, Cajun seasoning, do whatever. Granny always kept these simple. So for the sides, I'm using some of these like prepared microwavable mashed potatoes. And then I'm going to take a can of peas, add a little pat of butter, some salt and pepper, and just warm the peas up over the stove while the salmon patties are cooking. So like I said, 3 to 5 minutes per side. When I flip these, I like to use 2 spatulas. That just kind of helps the oil not to splash everywhere. And yeah, once they're golden brown and cooked all the way through, I am going to remove them to a plate lined with paper towels and just kind of let them drain for a couple minutes. And then that's it. This is what they look like when they were done. And here are the peas. And then for the mashed potatoes, I cooked them according to the package instructions. And then I added in just a tiny little pat of butter, little splash of milk, and some salt and pepper. Here is my plate. So I've got the salmon patties, the mashed potatoes and peas. Mashed potatoes and peas, mashed potatoes and green beans are one of the foods that I don't mind touching. I actually love eating them together. And then to eat the salmon patties, some people eat these with remoulade sauce. Some people, I've seen eat them with tartar sauce. I just like them with ketchup. And yeah, that was my dinner this night. Delicious. For dinner the next night, I made myself some chili. For years, I just kind of threw stuff together, but I always felt like sometimes I liked my chili, sometimes I didn't. So the past several times I've made it, I've used a recipe from, I think it's Spaceships and Laser Beams is the name of the food blog. I'll have it linked down in the description box below for you. So in this pot here, what I did was I took some lean ground beef. I browned it up with some diced onion and red bell pepper. Red bell pepper is just what I have on hand, and I prefer it anyway. And then I seasoned it with a little salt and pepper. Once the meat was all the way brown, I'm going to add in the remaining ingredients. Now, you can use ground beef, you can do ground turkey, ground chicken, you can do cubed up meat, whatever you prefer. Next, I added in some minced garlic. I'm just using the stuff from the jar. Gave that a stir and cooked it for about a minute. Now I'm going to add in my spices. So I'm going to add in the chili powder, then garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, paprika, then chipotle chili powder and cayenne pepper. And then I'm going to give that a stir and cook that for just a couple minutes, just to kind of bloom the spices. Now, once again, use whatever you like. You can totally use different seasonings. If you don't like things spicy, hold back a little on the cayenne and the chipotle chili powder. And like I said, I kind of follow the recipe that I'm going to link down below. I do as far as like the amounts of the ingredients, but I didn't necessarily do the recipe in the order that it said, if that makes any sense at all. Now, I used lean ground beef, so this was a little dry for my liking, so I added just a splash of olive oil, gave that a stir. Now, after that, minute or two cooking the spices that I mentioned, I'm going to add in the tomato paste, give that a stir, and then cook that for a minute or two, just to kind of get that like canned tomato taste out. I did have this recipe because it was just me eating it, but this recipe would easily be doubled or tripled if you're taking it to events. I know we've got fall coming up, football parties, gatherings, events, Halloween. This is a really good recipe, and I think it's not super spicy, so I think it'd be for everybody's palate. Now, I added in the tomato sauce, and then the recipe called for just diced tomatoes. I had this can of chili rotel, so I'm going to add that. And then as far as the beans, I think the recipe calls for dark red kidney beans. That's what I prefer. I don't drain or rinse them. You can if you want, but you could use really any kind of bean, black beans, regular kidney beans, cannellini beans, pinto beans, whatever you like. I'm going to give that a really good stir, and I decided that it was a little thick for my liking, so I added in some beef broth or some water and beef bouillon, gave it a stir, brought it to a boil, reduced it to a simmer, and really, you could eat this after 15 or 20 minutes, but chili, the longer it simmers, the better it gets, and it's always better the next day. Now, after usually about 30 or 45 minutes or so, I will taste the chili and adjust the seasonings from there. So if you do like your chili super spicy, you could, of course, add more spice. You can also dice up some jalapeno peppers or other peppers at the beginning when you're cooking up your meat. For me personally, it was a little bit acidic, so I added in just a tiny little pinch of brown sugar to that, as well as a little bit of salt and pepper. To serve this up, I just added some shredded cheese on top, and then this night I had it with some corn chips, and yeah, that was it. That was my dinner that night. The next day, I really didn't know what I wanted for dinner, and I wasn't really sure what time Gary would get home, or honestly, even if he would get home. And I don't mean that in an ugly way. I'm sure most of you heard about like the global IT outage that affected all the airlines, and Gary, unfortunately, and Dad got caught up in that. So basically, they were supposed to land at their destination Saturday around, I think it was like 5:30. And long story short, Gary ended up not arriving until Sunday at like 1 o'clock. But because they had canceled so many flights and rescheduled, he didn't actually land at his destination the next day at 1. He was still an hour and a half away. So he had to rent a car, drive the hour and a half. They lost his suitcase, so he had to rush to a store and get everything. It was just a mess. And so on his travel home, we weren't sure if flights were going to get delayed or what, but at least, it was very frustrating and long for them, but at least he arrived back home safe and sound, and that is all that matters to me. But I had some of the mashed potatoes left over from the salmon patty dinner, so I just did some quick potato cakes. I didn't really show me making this. I may have shared this before on my channel. If so, I'll link the video down below, but it's really, really similar to the salmon patties I made earlier. I just took the mashed potatoes, added an egg, a little bit of flour, some salt, pepper, garlic powder. You can add milk if it needed it. Mine didn't. I just form them into patties, cook them in oil on medium heat for maybe 5 minutes per side until they're golden brown, and drain them on a paper plate. And then that day I went to a fruit and vegetable stand, and I bought some fresh produce. And so I just sliced up some tomatoes and cucumbers and cantaloupe, and that's what I had for dinner that night. And I didn't get a picture of Gary's plate. He ate later than I did, but he ate the mashed potato cakes as well. For dinner the next night, I made the baked feta pasta. This was like all over TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and everything, maybe a year or two or so ago. It's been a while since I made this, so I decided to make it again. This is really easy. I've got my oven preheating to 400 degrees. I'm going to add some cherry tomatoes to a baking dish. And there are so many recipes for this, you guys. I've seen so many different versions. This is just how I decided to make it. I didn't follow a specific recipe, but I'll try to link one in the description. You know what? I'll link Taylor Elmore's, because I'd seen it a lot of places, but it was really her making this that kind of inspired me and finally convinced me to try it. So I'll link her video down below. So So next to the tomatoes, I'm going to add some olive oil. I'm using some Tuscan herb infused olive oil. Just use whatever you've got on hand. I'm going to add a little salt and pepper, give that a toss, and you do want to use quite a bit of olive oil. I know this looks like a lot. You do want to use probably at least a 1/3 cup or so, because that's really, that with the tomato juices are really what's going to make your sauce. So once I've seasoned the tomatoes, I'm going to add in my block of feta cheese, and then I'm adding a little drizzle of balsamic vinegar on top. You totally don't have to do that. I also decided to add some oregano, and then this is going to go into the preheated oven, and you'll bake this for about 45 minutes to an hour or so. Here's what it looked like at this point. I am going to add in some minced garlic at this point, along with some fresh basil. These tomatoes are so hot, this garlic will cook in no time. So I just added the garlic and basil, let it sit for like a minute, and then gave it a stir, mashing up the tomatoes and mixing it with the feta cheese. Next, I'm going to add in my pasta. Use whatever pasta you prefer. A lot of the recipes I've seen say to use a shortcut pasta. I use some cavatappi or corkscrew. I cooked it in some salted water according to the package instructions. And you do want to reserve some of your cooking water from the pasta, because sometimes you do need to add a little bit of that pasta water to, make the sauce nice and creamy. But yeah, once you get the pasta stirred in, that's pretty much it. Gary was pretty hungry this day, and I had some chicken breasts in my fridge I needed to use up really bad. So I just cooked up the chicken, just seasoned it both sides, salt, pepper, garlic powder, paprika, baked it in the oven until it was 165 degrees internal temperature, allowed it to rest, and then sliced it up. Here are the plates. So we've got the chicken, the pasta, and then I did some side salads, and this was delicious. I will say, though, with this pasta, if you've never made it before, feta cheese can be, well, it is, and depending on the brand and everything, can be really salty. So when I boil up my pasta, I use a little less salt than I normally do when I'm boiling pasta, and just kind of watch how much salt you add to the tomatoes. You can always add more, but it's really hard to take away. And like I said, that feta can be really salty, but this is such a quick and it's not quick in this. I mean, it takes like an hour to bake, but it takes like no prep time at all. You're not really having to do a lot. You don't have to babysit it. You just throw everything in the pan, pop it in the oven, and then mix it with some pasta. And especially right now when tomatoes are so fresh and delicious, if you can get like homegrown tomatoes, I think that would just like top this over the edge. For the last dinner in this week's video, I had planned a date night out, but Gary was so tired from all the travel and work and everything that he was like, I really just would like to order Chinese in and just watch a program. So that's what we did. We ordered Chinese and we got caught up on 60 Days In. That's one of the shows that like Gary used to watch, and I was kind of like, I can't believe you watched this, but I've got hooked. We both like it. So yeah, just ordered some sesame chicken fried rice, lo mein, a couple egg rolls, and some crab rangoons, and we just kind of ate a little bit of everything, had our own little mini Chinese buffet, and yeah, watched TV, and that was our dinner that night. All right, that is it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you liked this video and got some ideas of things to try from it. If you did like it, hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.